to this special event on Arise Television.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. I'm Ruben Abati, and it is my honor to co-anchor this national town hall meeting alongside one of the finest journalists in Africa, my brother Charles Anagulu. Good morning, Charles.
Good morning to you, Ruben, and good morning to our esteemed audience. There are moments in the life of every nation when difficult questions can no longer be postponed. For Nigeria, one of those questions is this: who should be responsible for keeping our communities safe? For our millions of viewers across Nigeria, Africa, and the world, this is an event of immense magnitude. It is not just another panel discussion, but a constitutional moment in Nigeria's democratic evolution.
Well, let me begin with a confession. Like all of us in this hall, I've watched the headlines. We have read of communities under siege, of families displaced, and of a nation crying out for safety. And we have also read of something else, a quiet but determined movement towards change. Just yesterday, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu inaugurated the Presidential Working Group on the National Policing Bill, chaired by the Chief of Staff, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. The Senate has already passed the Constitutional Alteration State Police Bill, and the Nigerian Governors Forum, led by the Chairman and Governor of Kwara State, Abdurrahman Abdurrazak, has submitted its framework to the National Security Advisor.
And as Ruben correctly pointed out, for decades, policing has remained the exclusive responsibility of the federal government. But as insecurity has spread from terrorism to banditry, kidnapping to communal violence, the debate over state police has moved from the margins of public discourse to the very center of national decision-making.
The question before us is no longer if Nigeria needs state police. The question is how. How will it work? How will it be funded? How will we safeguard it against abuse? And what role will you, the citizens of Nigeria, play? This is why we are here. Not to debate in abstract, but to build a national consensus. A consensus that will shape the future of policing and security in the country.
Indeed. And this country stands at what could become one of the most consequential constitutional crossroads since the return to democracy. Tonight, Arise News brings together the men and women who will help shape that decision, from government, security, the legislature, traditional institutions, civil society, and international experience, as we ask one defining question: can state police make Nigeria safer, or could it create entirely new dangers?
Let us now acknowledge the leaders, the governors, the legislators, and security experts who have answered this call. We're deeply honored by their presence, not because of protocol, but because they represent the weight and urgency of the moment. Well, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, while we were getting ready for the first panel, other distinguished Nigerians joined us. First, let me start with the Senate Majority Leader, who is now with us in the hall, Senator Michael Okpeyemi Bamidele, popularly known as MOB. He is the Majority Leader of the Senate of the Federal Republic, representing Ekiti Central. In that assembly, is a live bencher in the body of benchers and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. You are welcome, sir. We also had joining us the Right Honorable Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, CFR. He represents Bende Federal Constituency, Abia State, and is from a place called Agbamuzu in Bende local government area. He's the chairman of the Constitution Review and Amendment Committee in the 10th Assembly and convener of the Peace in the South and East Project, Southeast Project, PISE. And he and I share something in common. We are both Malabites. So, great Malabites. Absolutely. You are welcome. And another interesting thing about the Deputy Speaker is that he has 2 PhD degrees and by thesis.
Yeah, he's beaten you, hasn't he? He's beaten you. You've only got 1 PhD.
Well, you never know. Before I grow old, I may aspire to be like him. And then he has joined the panel. Also joining the panel is Honorable Nnena Ukeje. We also have General Lucky Rabo, who is now part of this first panel. And we have Senator Adams Oshiomhole. So our panel is set, and the topic for discussion is why this time? Why state police?
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Abati. And let's get seated and let's get started. And obviously it makes rational sense to start with the person who's closest to me, who is the Right Honorable Benjamin Kalu, who is the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let me start this way. For decades, Nigeria has responded to insecurity by increasing funding, deploying more troops, and recruiting more police officers. Yet insecurity persists. So before we debate state police itself, let me ask a more fundamental question. Is Nigeria's problem primarily one of policing or one of governance? Over to you.
Thank you very much. The conversation we are having currently, for every government, the position of the law has made it that protection of lives and properties should at all times be the issue on the front burner. And where we have found ourselves is that it is critical that we prioritize security. And this government has chosen it as a subject matter that should take the first position in all the agenda of this administration. Whether it is issue of governance, you can't take policing outside governance. That is the truth. Because governance is, policing is part of governance. Like I mentioned, the primary purpose of government is to protect lives and property. And in protecting lives and properties, you use security structure, security systems. And in this case, police is one of those structures that will be used for the protection of lives and property. Now, if policing is going to be used to protect lives and properties, how well have we done with it? Should be the question. The obsolete laws that centralize authorization points for policing has failed us over the years. And it is the purpose of government to do needs analysis, to know in the course of protecting lives and properties, how well has our laws served us? How well has the structure delivered on the expectation of Nigerians? As Parliament, which is the People's House, we have consulted, and we found out that there is a general consensus among Nigerians in the course of our public hearing that it is an issue that must be attended to. We must retool what we have currently as a structure that protects lives and properties. So we started questioning, how do we do it? Is it by unbundling it? Is it by making it, closer to the people? Is it by funding it more? What are the issues with the current structures that we have? one of the things we noticed was that proximity is key in policing. What do I mean by that? If the authorization point is at Abuja and events are happening far from Abuja, by the time the authorization comes, you find out that incidents of crime has already taken place. And it gets to a point, if you don't respond within the expected time, and some have argued 30 minutes is enough, some said Nigeria is currently at 90, but by the time you respond, and it is irredeemable, it means that the police has not achieved the purpose for which it was set up. So we said, okay, let us unbundle what we have at the moment so that response time to incidents of crime will be quicker. We said it is also to bring it closer to the people who understand the terrain. I've always said that those who live in the forest will understand the forest better as well as to protect it better. A situation where you have somebody in the creeks who understands the waterways, protecting that area will be easier than bringing somebody from, maybe for example, from the far north, who may not understand the language, the culture, the religion, and all that. So those are the benefits of bringing police closer to the people. And remember, what we are dealing with is 923,678 square kilometer spread of a nation, the size of our country. We are dealing with 220 million population. And the United Nations provision for policing is 1 to 450. What we have now from the IGP's reports, the last time I checked it, is that Nigeria is handling 600, if not more, covered by a policeman. And statistics also have shown that Nigeria, to beat up, we need to do about 190,000 more employment of police men to be able to meet up with it. So we said, if we unbundle it, the states will have closer, policing system that will make response time to be better than it is at the moment. And I'm sure with that, we'll be able to police better than how it has been. But many have argued that it will be abused, that the governors are going to abuse. And the question I always ask, we currently have state high courts in various states of the Federation. How many of these high courts have been used by the governors to jail those who are against them, maybe opposition?
Right.
The question goes on and on that, what are we doing as Parliament to protect? Yes, that question is legitimate, but we have put guardrails. In this law that is coming up, we decided to make sure that though we unbundle it from the from the exclusive legislative list to the concurrent legislative list, we said we are not going to leave it open-ended. There must be guardrails that will make sure that it will not be abused.
Right.
So the fears of Nigerians with regards to whether this is going to happen, we have been able to put some tools there that will guide the states in managing the state policing that we have in mind.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me come to you, the Executive Governor of Zamfara State, because this falls now in your province. You're a governor of a state, and Nigerians are examining whether state police can actually deliver the security that they are demanding. So let me put that question to you. From the point of view of a state governor, your reaction to the concept of state police.
Good morning, Charles, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be part of this panel where we will discuss issues of importance, especially in my role and my capacity as a governor of a state that is facing security challenges in the country. It is important to know that Zamfara State has been facing these challenges within the last 13 years. And we are being called as chief security officers of our respective states. However, the command and control structure is not under the governors. I'm happy with the latest development about the state police because it allows us to to keep to our responsibility and for our people also to hold us accountable as far as the security situation is concerned in our respective states. And that's why I've been part and parcel of this process. And I strongly believe by the time we have this state police in place, it will go a long way in solving a lot of the challenges, and we can now bear our names as proper chief security officers of our respective states. So I'm for this. However, I know there are concerns whether people will abuse this process or not. Let me say this. In every state today, you find that there's one form of security outfit or the other. It is important also to know that on assumption of office in May 2023, part of what we had to do was to create our own internal security system, which we call the CPG, Community Protection Guards. And the essence of this is we carefully selected people from their respective local governments, where they live with the people, where they understand the trend even better than conventional security forces within the state, to be able to be the first line of defense whenever there is such attack in those communities. So for me, it's a good development, and I am for it, and will now bear our names as the Chief Security Officer because the command and control structure will now be fully under the control of the governors. Yes, there's fear of abuse. I mean, let me say this, there is no perfect system. It's just a matter of putting process in place and check and balances. And I'm sure by the time we fine-tune the process, all this fear of abuses here and there, I think it's just a matter of time, it will be history. That's one. Two, even the fear, what we need to do is strengthen the legal framework. Because if there's a proper legal framework, I don't think there's any reason for people to fear that governors will abuse this process. For me, let me speak for myself. We have these community protection guards for the past 3 years, and there has never been any complaint where we use the security forces to either, jail somebody or put somebody from opposition on the defensive side. So I think for me, it's a very welcome development, and what we need to do with the help of the lawmakers, we should be able to fine-tune the process where the abuses will be limited going forward. But the most important thing is let's start somewhere. You also agree with me that the number of the police that we have in this country, is not justifiable. Like what the Deputy Speaker mentioned, if you look at the ratio of the population versus the police, it's unbelievable. So it now gives us the power to be able to equip our people, to employ more people, to handle this responsibility of fighting criminalities and other sort of crime within our respective states. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Governor. Let me come to you, Nana Ukeje, Honorable Nana Ukeje, who was a former member of the House of Representatives. We've heard the case for decentralization from the Honorable Deputy Speaker, from the Executive Governor of Zamfara State, but critics say you're solving one problem whilst creating another, potentially political abuse. Would you care to examine that concern and give us your assessment of it?
Okay, thank you very much, Charles. It is trite that every solution creates its own set of new challenges. It's also known that every innovation would come up with its own disruption. And so the challenges or the concerns that people have may be justified. But I think that more than that is the fact that I don't see that it's a process that has been well thought through. Now, and the reason for that, there's a consensus that we need to devolve security responsibilities down to the smallest levels, and everybody agrees, because, of course, policing is not what it should be. But then if we look at the challenges of policing, we must also look at the crimes that the police is supposed to handle. And so over the years, as we scream about the fact that the Nigerian police is not doing the work for which it's done, we must also interrogate the kind of crimes that we expect the Nigerian police to deal with. So over the years, what do we have in Nigeria now? We have terrorism, we have fundamentalism, we have banditry, we have illegal mining. And so a lot of the police has been depoliced. And so in a lot of places, we have a lot of police that have been killed alongside the military. And so people have not quite replaced them. A lot of the police stations have been burnt in the southeast where we come from. That place has been depoliced. They haven't been rebuilt. So I think that if we want to speak about state police, the first thing I would suggest is that we stand up the existing police structures. If we do not have a strong national police, then it is difficult for us to build on 36 police forces on a weak national police. Now, why is the national police not working? And let me say that I have an agreement that we must devolve. So, because I see His Excellency smiling and disagreeing with me that I don't think we should devolve. No, I think we should devolve. But I think that the knee-jerk reaction to devolving must come with a process. And what is that process? I think that first and foremost, we should look at what is required. One of the greatest things that is required is the transition period. We must look at the timelines. We must say, okay, what are we trying to do? We're trying to build a state police that is going to deal with terrorism. And my question is, are we expecting the state police? Because when people say, just build the state police and all our security problems will go away, is it the magic bullet? And I keep asking that question and nobody seems to be telling me that. Second of all, we're looking at funding. Now, the national police has had a problem with funding. With the states, everybody's talking about the state gaps. I just read the other day that the northern governors had come together and have come up with a 1 billion naira monthly intervention with security, because you will get the security you pay for. So how much money do the states have to build the kind of policing system that we require to deal with the security challenges that we have? Do we have a database? Now, I've read everywhere, and everybody's saying, oh, there's the urgency of now. We have to do it now. Everybody is in such a great big hurry. But you must train and retrain them. The Nigerian police school, the shortest training period is 6 months. And so we have to train and retrain. There has to be a method where we're training this police. There has to be a method where we're speaking about money, taxes, building. Everybody says, oh, as of today, the governors fund the police by 80%. And I'm saying, yes, they buy operational vehicles and they fuel them. But they don't buy the arms, the MRAPs, the guns. Again, one of the greatest problems before you go is proliferation of small arms and light weapons. As of today, the Nigerian police has lost 175,000 guns from their arms. Now we're going to build another police. Is anybody having any conversations with the Committee on the Proliferation, the Commission on the Proliferation of Small Arms and Light Weapons? Because we're going to have people, we're going to arm them down to the villages, and everybody is going to walk around with an AK-47. What are we going to do about those guns if there's no correct checks and balances? So my concerns will always be that we cannot talk about insecurity without talking about mopping up the guns. What is going to happen with all the other policing structures? For instance, in all this conversation, I've not heard anybody talk about the NS, the other people, not the police.
Civil defense.
Civil defense. I've not heard anybody talk about civil defense. Civil defense is equipped, they're built to do certain things. Where are they in this conversation? What is the military intervention? Where are the jurisdictional stop gaps? I don't hear those conversations. All I hear is that people want state police, and it sounds like the panacea to all our problems. But I think that the little nitty-gritty issues must be dealt with, because we're dealing with something that has the potential, if not done properly, to create more problems. So, I mean, there's so many of us on the panel, so I shall yield back. But those are my initial concerns about this knee-jerk reaction and the quick reaction to national police. I do not believe that as we speak today, with the kind of insecurity that Nigeria faces, that state police necessarily will deal with the terrorism that we're dealing with, and so on and so forth. I think we need to talk about it and look at it much, much better and create the timelines and the checks and the overlaps and the jurisdictional confusion that is likely to come up if it's not thought through properly.
Thank you very much indeed. And those are very, very salient points that I think everybody here should take on board as this discussion continues. And let me move now over to the former Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Irabo. We're very, very honored to have you here. And coming off the back of Honorable Lena Ukeja there, I mean, talking about the proliferation of arms and all the other issues of concern, critics, and I presume she's one of them, warned that state police could become the native authority police of old or private armies in modern uniforms. I mean, but here's the challenge. If not state police, then what? How do we fix a policing system almost everyone agrees is overstretched? General Irabo.
Thank you very much, Charles. Let me thank you for that intervention. But before I address your question, let me try to bring greater clarity to what I consider to be a misconception regarding the state police. Sometimes we fail to realize that currently we have police stations across the country, down to the local government and even to village levels. That is what we have currently. So when people say that policing need to get to the grassroots, and so state police will help to address that, I think they miss the point. State police, vis-a-vis the federal police, is all about command and control. Which level of control, which level of command do you have? Such that responses are quicker, interventions to issues of law enforcement will be greater, will be improved. So this is where state police comes in. So let us get it right that state police is not about whether there will be those that will be recruited from the community, because currently we do have, there is no local government where you don't have representation in the federal police. Ditto for the armed forces. But then we are looking at a structure that where the command and control will be so devolved such that there will be quicker responses to issues. I just thought it's essential for us to have that common understanding. Now, I do not think that there will be duplication of responsibilities. Why? Because the more, in my view, the merrier. But then that is with a caveat. And what is that caveat? Currently, why we believe that the federal policing system is not serving the purpose is because we have not actually taken time to interrogate why they are not effective. And our failure in that regard, and which I believe that we should do, we should take time now that we're discussing state police, to be able to interrogate it such that when state police comes into existence, and I believe it's already come into existence, I believe that the state houses of assembly will give concurrence to what the National Assembly has done. But then when they fully come on stream, the disease that has infected the federal police, we must do well to address the root causes of that disease so that it will not affect the state police. And what do I mean? It is necessary for us to look at how the federal police currently is structured, the logistics, the equipment, the training, among several other indicators. And for state police, I also believe that the same thing has to be done, such that training establishments need to be established. The protocols for training, the equipping, and among several other details need to be specified. Otherwise, we'll be having disparate, approach to state police, especially from state to state. So for us to have a uniform structure, a uniform training, as well as the doctrine, if you like, policing principles, it is good for us to have designated training establishment where, irrespective of the state, the recruits will be trained, and then they go back to their various states to be able to implement what they have learned. Also, within the local, within individual states, especially for those who will be, I believe that all states will key into it, no doubt. But then that the recruitment within the state itself, we have local governments. So how do we ensure that it is, adequate representation from each of the local governments? And then who are those? What is the kind of, individuals that will be recruiting? How do we ensure that we are not going to be recruiting criminals into the state police, among several other things? So I think that these are the greater issues that we need to trash out such that we'll be able to have what is intended for the establishment of the state police itself. I think that for me is, of course, state police, in my view, it ought to have been yesterday, but thank God we're having it today. But then what do we do to ensure that we have a potent police force, not a police force that we'll see on the road? In fact, if you even say this is law enforcement agent, you'll be asking yourself, are we really, serious? So these are the things I believe that we should address in order to make greater progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, General Irabo. And if you could kindly pass that microphone over to distinguished Senator Adams Oshimole, who was a former governor of Edo State and whose robust submissions at the National Assembly continue to enthrall Nigerians and engage them on a daily basis. Thank you very much indeed, Senator, for taking the time to join us today. The Nigerian police force has repeatedly argued that many of its challenges stem from inadequate funding, personnel shortages, and logistics, not necessarily constitutional design. You are a senator, you're one of those who examines the Constitution. So let me ask you this directly. Would state police solve the problem or simply redistribute it?
Thank you very much. First, my view is that there is inherent contradiction if you look at the provisions of the Constitution. The state governor is the chief security officer. What is the tool of enforcing security? If a state has to have responsibility for primary health care, can it do so without the Ministry of Health? So I cannot be a state security officer. I have no control. I can't give orders to the police. I can't discipline my instrument of control. I cannot promote. I cannot recruit. So it's like calling me a husband, but I have no wife. So I think that over the ages, people have realized that the system as it is isn't working. And I can tell you, because one of the issues raised by those who have spoken include the fact that they think, will the state be able to fund the police? Nobody will be able to fund anything you do not believe in. Where we put money is a reflection of our values and of our priorities. And the responsibility of a state, of a subnational government, just like a national government, is to lay out its priorities and allocate resources in a manner that reflect those priorities. I can tell you as a governor, a former governor, and current governor may dispute it if they so wish. But in truth, the amount of money I had to spend to procure vehicles, communication gadgets as governor of Edo State was much more than the federal government vehicles that we had in Edo State. Unfortunately, my responsibility ends at procuring these vehicles. When they are misused, they are mismanaged, and I even suspect that they are stolen by those who are supposed to maintain them. I do not have the legal enablement to go beyond asking questions to enforcing discipline. And people talk about possible abuse. My response is, even today, are Nigerians, including the media, not amplifying some cases of abuse of federal police, either by federal authorities or even by state authorities, misusing the police and listen to them. I think the point is you can't have a subnational government charged, among other things, with the responsibility of contributing to the maintenance of law and order and protecting life and property, and deny any of the levels of government the means with which to do so, and yet to hold them responsible. Every day in the Senate, we receive reports, and even some of our senators are harassed by their constituents. Why are we exposed to these avoidable crimes? I can also tell you for a fact, as governor of Edo State, we have cases in which the commissioner of police identify and arrest some criminals. And then there is a call from Abuja that those criminals be released. And to my pain and helplessness, they are released. I had a case in which I accused the police authorities where my personal assistant was assassinated. The report by DSS points to one thing. The report by the Nigerian Police Headquarters suggests otherwise. Completely incoherent. And I'm helpless. I can see the officers involved in the crime, but I can do little or nothing about it. So my argument is, those who talk about whether this will be properly done, it will be properly done. That is why we are in a democracy. If you elect a governor and he mistake the state police as his personal police and misuse them, please next time vote them out. And the media will have a duty to amplify all of those elements in the system who are misusing. There is no human being who doesn't have the capacity either to use his office efficiently and responsibly or to misuse his powers irresponsibly. Those two things are present. Now, what determines who we elect and who we keep in office will have to be how he uses all the facilities under his control, whether resources entrusted to you, the instrument of governance, etc., etc. And let me share this with you. And this was for me something extremely painful I will never forget in a hurry. There was an incident of fire incidents in Edo. And as the governor of Edo State, I am responsible to ensure that lives and properties are safe. And I wanted the commissioner of police to give me information as to whether or not this particular incident was caused by natural electrical problems or it was a case of arson. And to my shock, the CP said he can't come to see me in the office. I should send my ADC at midnight with a marked vehicle. The name of this commissioner is one Mr. Balogun, around 2013. And I said, is there anybody who is doubting the fact that I'm the governor of Edo State, that you can't see me? So when people even talk of abuse, they proceed to suggest as though currently there are no abuses. There are. Let me conclude by saying this. You cannot, unless you amend the Constitution to remove the word, governors are the chief security officers of their state. Just to comply with that segment of the Constitution, the governor needs the instrument to perform as a truly chief security officer. And lastly, is it the fact of being at the national level that informs your character, or is it the nature of your person? Because the question of misuse of power is not limited to any particular arm of government. So I think that at this point we have to look at the debate over the years, because I also asked, I heard you saying, why now? Why not now? Why not now? Because even when I was governor, before I became governor, this issue has been in discussion. And I watch from my rise every day. You join the rest of the people lamenting what has become of our country. You catalog all the failings of security. Can we stop at lamenting? When I watch TV and I see responsible people complaining, interrogating my competence as a senator, the competence of the federal government about security, it is not for me to just feel the heat. It is to set me thinking, this being the case, and having passed resolutions after resolutions, nothing is changing. Should we not think of a new way to do it? So we can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect remarkable different outcome. This is now common sense and common sense all over the world. Lastly, are we about to invent something new? Each time I watch television and I read newspapers, people talk about the contradiction of a nation that chooses a federal system and yet run its affairs in a unitary manner. So if, as we always do, my brother inclusive, that is the Aquaman, we say we make up references to the American system. They have state police, they have federal police. Sometimes there is tension between the two. We can see where the federal authority wants to deploy federal guides, and we see a state government saying, no, we don't need them. This is a healthy debate. It is not a reason to suggest that one should replace the other. They have to learn how to complement, not how to compete. So I conclude by saying that this is a worthy conversation, very important at this time. I'm convinced that it's now better to err on the side of additional police. And let me ask you, have you asked the federal authorities why we created road safety? That should be a department, or used to be a department of the Nigeria Police, the traffic division. Are our roads safer? Then we created civil defense. How can you be civil if you carry a weapon? What distinguishes a civil defense officer with a sophisticated weapon from the Nigeria Police? So you can see that even the federal government create these additional agencies, but the output, the benefit is doubtful. So I will say that let us know, let citizens know who they should hold responsible. If they are shouting at their governor, I am under attack, let the governor deploy his men. If he doesn't deploy, let the people vote against him in the next election. For me, that is it. But this is a worthy, I'm happy with this initiative, and I believe we can continue with the conversation and deepen it further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Honorable Adams Oshimole, who has what the liberation theologians call the epistemological privilege of straddling both the legislature and the executive, because of course he was a governor of a state, so he knows what it feels like to be a governor and a chief security officer without the power to actually do anything about security in his state. And now he's legislating and making laws about state police. So we're very privileged to have you here. Thank you very much indeed. And if you could pass the microphone over to the governor of Enugu State, Peter Amba. Governor, welcome again. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you here. And one of the big issues, of course, about state policing, beyond all the, the fears about potential abuse, is funding. How do we deal with state police today? A police that needs technology urgently, surveillance, forensic science, communications, intelligence gathering, data analysis. And many people say Nigeria is really far behind many other countries in terms of modernizing the police. But no one can deny that Enugu State has taken the lead in that direction. It's invested heavily in surveillance technology, command and control centers, and intelligence-led policing. Governor, let me ask you this. How did you do it? And From what you know now, with all that investment, is this the direction that every Nigerian state should be moving towards? And of course, your own general impressions as well about state policing.
Thank you very much, Charles. I believe that as the distinguished senator, former governor, had just mentioned, we're not essentially here to debate the idea or the theory of state policing, because I think there is already a constitutional responsibility for that. I mean, the security and welfare of government, would be, of course, would be the primary responsibility of government, security and welfare. And so that constitutional responsibility exists. What we're essentially saying here is, do we have the operational authority to match that responsibility? And I think this is where the conversation on how we decentralize the policing system so that those that are responsible for certain outcomes are equally provided with the tools to deliver those outcomes. And there is no doubt that the current model is not sufficient to deal with the threats we're facing as a country. So the current model has not kept pace with the security threats we face today as a country. And if the Enugu's experience is anything to go by, we came into office recognizing that we've made commitments to eradicate poverty, to grow the economy exponentially, to make Enugu State the preferred destination for living and investment. We immediately recognize that if we don't address the security challenges, and we are talking about what we inherited, we're talking about a state that was under siege. We had nightlife was gone. Mondays were deserted. Schools closed. We also have our children who lost entire year because they could not sit external exams. And in some cases, we even have areas that were barricaded because of security threats. So for us, security became the biggest elephant in the room, so we had to invest hugely in technology, but there is also the human element in that ecosystem. We had to set up the distress response squad, which again require that we bring in the existing police. And just as the last speaker said, we had to essentially build local capability. So, and that's essentially what should be, when you talk about funding, you see that the states are already carrying quite a huge burden of that, because you are investing in technology, building a safe city surveillance system with the CCTV cameras, with AI enabled, and having both the static and the mobile cameras. All these come with huge costs. But what is important is also that human element that you require, which is essentially why we had to build the DRS, the Distance Response Squad, because you may, as a governor, want immediate action. And the response to that action may change, delayed, or sometimes diluted. So you must be in a position, because matters of security is measured in minutes. That quick response, you must be in a position where you're able to act swiftly. Build the capability to first nip crime in the bud, but where there has been a breach, you must have the capacity to act swiftly. And if the Enugu experience is anything to go by, that essentially is what we did in Enugu that enabled us to drive down the violent crime by over 90%. And I think that it just speaks to the importance and why we can't even be sitting here debating whether or not decentralizing policing system is necessary, because I think that's a settled debate. What we really should be talking about is how do we measure, how do we implement. Again, I think that there should be a national standard, there should be a local capability, there should be a national support, there should be a local decision making, and all that would be in a detail. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to have a system where we are able to create some feasibility, some flexibility in terms of rejigging whatever we're going to adopt, so we don't have to go through a very rigorous system. So if we're amending the Constitution, by all means, we must make sure it's not verbose, so that there is a provision that allows us, when we have tried the system, if we need to reform, because if you look at the systems where the centralized policing is happening today, they have also had their reforms. It didn't quite work smoothly from the onset. So we would have teething problem, no doubt. There would be, of course, a change management system, because we've had a system that we've lived with in the last 50 years or so. So there's by all means going to be that process where we need to make provision for that change management. And if we have to reform that, we should be able to do that without going through again a constitutional amendment process. But I think the view that responsibility should also go with some level of operational authority, in my view, shouldn't be debatable. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Governor, and let me congratulate you once again on what you're doing in Enugu State, certainly with respect to state police and other things. I mean, you're clearly ahead of the pack, if I can put it that way. Let me come to you, Mr. Bukar Usman. If you could give him the microphone, Governor. He is, of course, a Nigerian historian and folklorist, and his input obviously hugely important at a gathering like this, and at a time when Nigerians need to refresh their memory about their history in this context. Let me ask you this, Mr. Usman. Nigeria, of course, attempting to redesign the Nigerian police. Let's imagine that you're addressing every governor in Nigeria tonight on behalf of the Nigerian people with regard to state police. What would you say to them?
Let me say this. I want to apologize in the first instance that what I'm going to say may not be all what I need to say, simply because I'm coming from a background of a bureaucrat, and in official circles, there is limit to what one can discuss in terms of security matters publicly. We are guided by Official Secrets Act and also the need to know basis in disseminating information. But I have been an advocate for local police, not necessarily state police, local police. And this arose from my experience as a child back in my village in Biu, Borno State, where I observed the native authority police were operating. Also, as a public officer, my schedule has been security matters or security administration. So my position and advocacy for local police, not necessarily state police, dates back to my experience as a boy in 1950s. But coming to the present state, the Constitution is quite clear, and also subsidiary legislations. They set out different bodies. There is National Security Council, National Defense Council, state level, local government level. My question is, are all these bodies properly set up, that is constituted? Do they meet regularly? Do they submit their reports to the authorities, higher authorities? Under the colonial system, the district officer will report to the resident will report to the lieutenant governor, the lieutenant governor will report to the governor general in Lagos. Now we have these levels of structures. As far as I'm concerned, there is nothing wrong with the structure in terms of security, because other countries are even copying our own. The second point is about, well, with due respect to Oshamole, my comrade, he said, you have a wife, that is a husband has a wife. I said, look, I have these two constitutions. The one of 1989, the amended one of 2003. Go to section 213 and 215 of the old one and the new one. You will find all the powers required by a state governor to give instructions to the police commissioner and the police. And it says that the commissioner of police shall, not may. The only proviso is that they said, in case he is giving a not lawful direction, he said, please, sir, I think this needs to be cleared with the higher authority. That is the only proviso. And remember that state executives or even chief executives swear by oath when they take office that they will treat people, all manner of people, fairly. So it's not an exception of whether political or something. But you cannot use state authority unfairly. And that is where the discretion arises. So at the end of the day, it's a human factor. We talk of democracy in some countries. We have the structures. Why is it working in some countries and not working here? That is the question. I said, and in terms of local police, I'm talking about local knowledge. Local knowledge is very, very important. Today we are talking of ungoverned places. Why should that be arise? When even ordinary hunters knows in and out of whatever territory exists. You cannot operate effectively without local knowledge. You take me there to riverine area. As you drop me into water, that is where I will sink. I don't know. I can't swim. So you need local knowledge. The emphasis is on local knowledge. And who knows in and out of a place other than the person very close to the ground. And I'm saying that if all these bodies spelled out in the Constitution are working properly, There is no reason or no way you cannot pick issues at the local level before they arise and become a problem at the national level. Let those bodies spelled out in the Constitution be properly constituted. Let them meet regularly. Let them submit reports regularly to the higher authorities without consideration to political affiliation. Oh, I cannot submit my report because I belong to this political party or something. Security matter, life and what is life and property of an individual has been emphasized here as the responsibility of government. You put everything aside once it comes to security matter. So let me stop here.
Thank you very much. Let me come to you, Honourable Senate Majority Leader Obeyemi Bamidele. Thank you very much indeed for your patience. You're sitting all the way at the end, so I'm afraid you had to wait for the microphone to make the rounds up to you, but thank you for your patience. You are, of course, in a chamber whose job it is to oversight the executive of this country, and you've obviously been part of the design, the legislative design of the state police. It will be obviously the province of a lot of the state assemblies, but you are on top of the pecking order, as they say. Greater authority, which is being delegated to the states now, inevitably comes with greater accountability. And it is your job to ensure that that accountability prevails. If governors eventually control state police, which they're likely to do, how should Nigerians judge whether that experiment has succeeded from the context of accountability?
Well, thank you so much, Charles, and I thank everyone who has spoken on the panel. Again, this is one of those situations where they say philosophers have interpreted the world. What is left is to actually change it. That's what this whole thing is all about. What the National Assembly is doing, what the executive arm of government is doing, what critical stakeholders are doing. Let me also emphasize that the various concerns that have been expressed from different quarters are well-founded concerns that we cannot sweep under the carpet or pretend that they are not real. Because a lot of these concerns also are concerns informed by what had happened in the past, especially with the native police authorities and some other things that had happened. But let me say that when it comes to issues of accountability, it's something that will have to be addressed both at the level of legislative intervention through the law, as well as vigilance on the part of the people, of the Nigerian people, the voters, the civil society, and all those who are interested in how they are governed. Now, part of the issue that must be addressed very well is the issue of funding. First, we must even understand itself the political economy of funding the police. If we're having state police, mind you, Charles, it's not every state that will immediately, we finish amending this constitution, go to town to say we are launching a state police. Because all we are trying to achieve with this constitutional amendment is to move this duty, this constitutional duty, from the exclusive legislative list that preserves it only for the federal government to the concurrent legislative list, where state governments will also become critical stakeholders and they can have their state policing. Now, those who express the fear of abuse only talk of political abuse. If the state police is not well funded, it's not only state actors or politicians that can abuse this. Let me tell you, business class, members of business class can also abuse it. Some other organizations, even criminals, the cabals can abuse it because it's a question of he who pays the piper dictating the tune. So if the state police is not well funded by any means, you have a situation where it may as well be a highway to nowhere. And that is one thing all of us must prevent. So for me, part of the critical issues that we need to look into, even in making these laws, is to see how we can guarantee, to a very reasonable extent, the fiscal independence, fiscal as in financial independence of, the state police. In other words, it should not be at the discretion entirely of a governor in a state as to whether or not I want to fund the police. In other words, if the police is not responding well to the dictates of the governor, he may choose. So we must have a situation where there will be some first line item provisions in our law that say, wait, in the same way you have the judiciary having a first line item provision in the Constitution, that they don't have to, the Chief Justice of Nigeria does not have to take a file to the President and Commander-in-Chief waiting for approval on every procurement they want to do, just like a minister would do, or will not have to go to FEC to go and get an approval to spend money, because that line is already guaranteed, and that's why it's called first line charge. So in other words, the police chief or police commissioner or police commander, whatever name it's called eventually, heading the state, and the State Police Service Commission must have a guaranteed source of income in a way that it will not be subject to the whims and caprices of a sitting governor. Like I said, philosophers have interpreted the word, what is left is to change it. We must bring this to reality. But then take it from there that the next step will be how to also comprehensively ensure that all of us stakeholders work together. The Nigerian people have done so much. Unfortunately, sometimes part of the criticism is such that you begin to wonder, how much of the people who are criticizing the government also understand the inner workings of government and the challenges that government has to deal with. But of course, it is always the people that can criticize the government. Government cannot criticize the people. It is the people that can dissolve the government. Government cannot dissolve the people, And it's just that it's important that all of us continue to work together in partnership with critical stakeholders within the society to ensure that we get to our place of El Dorado. I thank you.
Professor Chukwuma Charles Soludo is also joining us by Zoom.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for joining us. Well, very quickly, we've been having a panel on this subject of building a consensus. And as a governor who is tackling the issue of insecurity frontally in your state, I would like to ask you, what keeps you awake at night about state police? Is it the likely abuse? Is it funding? Or is it that you think that the project, even with the progress that has been made, may be stillborn? Maybe not in Anambra, maybe in other parts of the country.
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks everyone. My deepest apologies that due to some conflict in scheduling, I'm unable to join you live there. But thank you for having me, and thanks to Arise TV for organizing this, and to all who have participated. I've listened to a few of the earlier speakers, excellent presentations. I listened to Adams Oshomala, I listened to my brother, Governor of Enugu, and others, for the excellent interventions. And I want also to thank the National Assembly for passing this desired constitutional amendment. And then also to the President of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR, whom I refer to as Professor of Federalism. This is the issue of state police. I say it in a context of a march towards a more functional, effective federal structure. And so in my intervention, I'm just going to make 2-3 quick points. But before then, just to make the point that the issue is no longer whether or not to have state police. I think we've gone beyond that. The issue is how. And I'm not going to waste your time talking about what we did in Anambra and so on to clear off 8 local governments that were under siege, or 62 criminal camps, and they are ending the sit at home and so on and so forth. The kind of coordination and collaboration with federal and even private agencies, security agencies, that had to entail. I think now the issue is the how. And I understand the various efforts and work in progress going on at the levels of the National Security Advisor, the Attorney General of the Federation, and the Chief of Staff to the President, and various committees working out the details, and the governor's involvement as well. And so, I mean, the debates about even the types of, as trivial as the types of ammunition to use and for the state police versus federal and so on and so forth, the arms and ammunition to use. But where you are fighting criminals who have AK-49 and GPMGs, and you send people with dead guns to go and fight them and so on. So there are issues about the how that need to be debated. But let me tweak this conversation a little bit in 2 ways. I frame it that this whole state police is not to be seen in isolation. It needs to be seen in the context of what I call the unfinished business towards sustainable federal security and justice system. It has to be sustainable. It has to be a federal system, security and justice system. We want greater and better security. And just 2 points I leave you to ponder in this, what I call this unfinished business. There are many big elephants still in the room to be discussed. Yes, fantastic. I listened to the Deputy Speaker talk about the various devolutions that are taking place now. Fantastic. Electricity market, we have the issue of local government autonomy, the criminal justice system, we now have to have our own correctional centers and so on and so forth, and now state police. But one thing that is missing yet in the entire conversation is that we're having increasing devolution of functions from the exclusive legislative list onto the concurrent. Responsibilities are being devolved from the federal government to states, but without corresponding drastic revisions of the revenue allocation formula. Federal government still retains about 53% of the federation revenue. States, 26%. That's for each state an average of 0.7% on the average. And people believe that if we're actually going to have sustainable federalism, in which you have what I might call the true pyramid, the base is where the resource, and we keep a lean center, as it were, that we need to quickly, the big elephant to be addressed is the revenue allocation thing, to have a true pyramid. And the federal government not having, there are debates as to where it should be, but no more than 40% of the federation account. And the rest should devolve down to the base, as it were. Number 2, and that's my last point, is towards a federal judicial system. For example, we have a current unitary system today. You have a federal police to be in charge of federal offenses under the new revisions or amendments. State police to be in charge of state offenses. But our judicial system is in the other way. We still live in a judicial system that is ostensibly unitary. The appellate system, if somebody steals a pot of soup in a village in Anambra here, and they go to court, the appeal system will go all the way to the Supreme Court of Nigeria. Land, for example, is under the Nigeria's Land Use Act, exclusively a state affair. But then, in Anambra, for example, 70% of the litigations you have, and I would dare to say even violence, criminality, related to land, because we have the second smallest land mass after Lagos, so land is the issue here. You have people quarreling over the boundary of their land in a village. And where does it end? It ends at the Supreme Court. Sometimes the cases last 30 years, 40 years in the judicial system. Come on. So, why is this part of this conversation not including the judicial reform, the judicial architecture, so that you have state judiciary, you have state appeal court, and state Supreme Court? For example, I don't understand why the issue of land should go beyond the state. In the United States, where we copied this our federal system from, they have state Supreme Courts. So this is the time I'm throwing this on the basket of the unfinished business for both the National Assembly, and I know that our president, whom I describe as a professor of federalism, when we were in government, when he was governor of Lagos, I was governor of Central Bank. Anytime he spoke, he gave us all lectures on federalism. And I'm not surprised that he's dealing with all these issues of devolutions and marching towards a more perfect federal system. But the big elephant, one of the big elephants, is our judicial system. Because states are now going to begin to build their own correctional centers. And you put up a correctional center, you have arrested somebody, the guy is not guilty, for example, he's been convicted, he's there, and the appeal system lasts for the next 30, 40 years in the federal appeals process, when the thing has to do with just a land matter in the village somewhere. No. So I'm saying that as part of this conversation, we need to come in with a broader conversation about how to develop a more sustainable federal security and justice system that includes the issue of devolution of resources, that includes the issue of fundamental restructuring of our judicial system, the architecture of our judiciary, as the case may be. All of them link back again to how this system is going to operate. Forgive me, I just wanted to throw in this because when I listened to my other colleagues, Adams Oshomal, Governor Oshomal, Senator, super excellent. He just said much of what I would have said, and my brother, Governor, but unfortunately I didn't listen to the others. I just rushed from an event to join this. But I think let the conversation go on towards a more sustainable federal structure.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Professor Chukwuma Charles Soludo.
Arise News Town Hall on State Policing. With me, my colleague, Dr. Reuben Abati. Over to you, Reuben.
Thank you very much, Charles. Well, this session is going to be on state police and security infrastructure. And our panel is set, as announced earlier on by Charles Aniagulu. I understand the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission has joined, Professor Professor Tony Ojukwu. And then, of course, you can see the governors there. The governor of Plateau State, Governor Caleb Mutfwang, former governor of Ogun State, Aremo Olusegun Oshoba, current governor of Ogun State, Prince Dapo Abiodun, Senator Natasha Akpoti, chief of, no, he's not chief of defense staff now, he's Minister of Defense. And then, of course, we have Dubem Mogalu, Senior Special Assistant to the President, Planning and Research. And then, of course, we don't have Mr. Tosin Ajayi, the DG of DSS, but our panel is set, and we'll be looking at security, architecture, and state police. Well, let me take my seat, and I would like to start very quickly with Governor Dapo Abiodun. Governor Abiodun, you've been quoted as saying that all the state houses of assembly will pass the bill in one day. Are you so sure about that, considering that the various states have different kind of politics, they have different set of skills in terms of power relations in their states? Why are you so sure that one day all the...
Let me first appreciate the Arise group for organizing this very important town hall meeting on a matter that has become a national consensus, one of the few subject matters in Nigeria that has become nationally accepted. Again, I want to appreciate all those who are on this panel. I think that, in my opinion, the 24th day of June 2026 will remain a historic day in the history of this country. And that was a day that Mr. President sent the executive bill on the creation of state police to the National Assembly, and the same day the Senate deliberated on this bill and effectively passed this bill. Like other panelists had remarked earlier, this is a bill that preceding administrations had tried, but had not quite succeeded in making this far. And again, I'm very excited that we're even here having this kind of discussion because it has gotten a widely agreed national consensus. I want to appreciate the National Assembly. I want to appreciate all the stakeholders that worked on this bill so far. A lot has gone on behind the scenes. And in the course of what I'm going to say, I will answer the question that you asked me, which was, why am I so sure that the various state House of Assemblies will pass this bill? And the reason for that is very simple. One, I am the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum Committee on the State Police creation, and that goes to underscore the importance that the subnational heads have attached to the creation of state police. It's a subject that we have long desired because, like you all know, we are meant to be the chief security officers of our various states, and hitherto, we've had very little powers. And despite that, we have been largely responsible for funding and supporting the police formations in our various states because, of course, our primary responsibility is peace, security, welfare, and well-being of our citizens. So the Nigerian Governors Forum had immediately set up a committee of governors and some of our attorneys general to begin to deliberate, interrogate this subject matter so that we can provide the necessary support to this executive bill. And that is exactly what has transpired today. So we've worked hands in gloves with the executive and the legislative arm of government in what you saw as the final bill. So it has our input, and we are all very excited because what we see here is a dream that we've had for so many years unfolding. What we see here is what I believe validates what we've for such a long time advocated for, which is community policing. What we see here is also a validation of the various security arrangements that we've had in our various sub-regions. Like for in the Southwest, we have the Southwest Security Network, also called Amotekun, which has been very successful because they complement the police, they provide intelligence, and they are closer to the people. So we believe that in the first instance, when this bill is passed, it will provide for immediate employment opportunities across the country, across the 774 local governments in Nigeria and 36 states. You immediately see a better police to citizen ratio. To date in Nigeria, we are probably averaging about, one police to maybe about 600 to 660 citizens. The global benchmark is meant to be one police to 250 citizens. The UN benchmark is one police to about 440 citizens. Today in Ogun State, for example, we've got about maybe 6,000 Amotekun, vigilantes, so safe, and all other arrangements that we have. And if you multiply that by 36 at the minimum, it means that if today that whistle is blown, you have probably an extra 300 to 400,000 boots on the ground in various states. So we've had an input into it, and the idea is that by the time, of course, the amendment is what is on the table today, once the constitutional amendment is passed, which removes policing from the exclusive legislation to the concurrent. Once that is passed, it goes to the various states' House of Assembly. Because of our input and involvement, what we aim to do is to ensure that all our various House of Assembly pass this bill on the same day. So that is why you've heard me speaking about our resolve to ensure that the bill is passed on the same day. Now, going forward, the bill passing the constitutional amendment is one thing. This next thing is how to operationalize this new amendment to the Constitution, knowing that what the Constitution envisaged, as it reflects today, is a unitary police force. So there has to be consequential amendments in the bill. Like Senator Kwemi said earlier, or I think it was the Deputy Speaker that said, he's not so sure whether it will be an amendment to the Police Act or it will be a repeal of that act and a reenactment of another one. Whichever way it is, the bulk of the work is in sitting down and in ensuring that that new bill speaks to how the new state police will function, how they will be structured, how they will relate to the new national police, the guardrails to ensure that there are no abuse, the new police council, National Police Council, the new Police Service Commission, the funding for this police, the training for the police, and all other associated measures that will ensure that indeed the new state police functions as envisaged. So that is the next step. And I have the privilege of also being part of the working committee that is set up by the federal government to ensure that in the next 7 weeks, come up with what should reflect what this new bill should look like. Thank you very much for being on the program.
I want to stay with you a bit. You have commended the Inspector General of Police, IGP Tunji Disu, on Operation Kusaye. Operation Kusaye is a collaborative effort between Ogun State and Oyo State. But in the context of state police, what will happen to Operation Kusaye? Will it die a natural death, or would there be some kind of special arrangement? Because what the Constitution will provide for is a dual police structure.
Operation Kusaye was actually a collaboration between Ogun State and Lagos State police commands. And it was a proactive step, first to clearly, unequivocally, show that we would not tolerate any form of breakdown of law and order. There is no room in both our states for banditry and all forms of criminality. And it was a very, very successful operation. Of course, it was also a show of force which allowed our law enforcement agencies, the entire law enforcement architecture in both states, to not just parade what they have, but actually go into all our various forest reserves and those areas that were hitherto described as ungoverned areas and flush out all the criminal elements. And in the course of that, we actually rescued some kidnapped victims that nobody knew about and also arrested those that were responsible. Now, your question was that what happens to Operation Kusaye when we have the state police? Well, I believe that, those are part of the questions that the bill will address. And that will fall under the alienation of responsibilities. And the way we see it is that, issues that relate to the federal issues, federal crimes will still be attended to by the federal police. Issues of terrorism, issues that are interstate will be attended to by federal police, whilst intrastate issues, issues of banditry, issues of kidnap, and other local issues will be dealt with by the state police. However, there will also, be cooperation and collaboration between, the state police, who will now be implementing community policing, knowing fully well that a majority, if not all, the members of the state police will be from that state. They will be recruited from that state. They understand and they are very familiar with the terrain. They speak the language. They'll be able to, they are people that are closer to the people. They'll be able to provide better intelligence. So henceforth, in such operations, what we envisage is there will be, since that operation was an operation that was, a bi-state operation, it will be an operation that will be carried out by a collaboration and cooperation between the state police and the federal police. Of course, there are so many issues that we still need to look into. Issues related to the Firearms Act. And surprisingly, nobody discussed that, or perhaps I wasn't listening, The Firearms Act also is one of those acts that only envisage a unitary police. This will still either have to be repealed or amended, because you cannot have a state police that will not bear arms. Of course, there must be adequate control mechanisms to ensure that a licensing or oversight authority still remains at the federal. We must remind ourselves that our president remains the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And he must be the chairman of the police council, the Federal Police Council, which would ensure that issues of licenses and licensing of firearms, issues relating to the required training of these various state police officers are at par with what currently obtains, so that you are not just throwing out policemen who are half-baked, who are not adequate, who are not well-trained in various states. So again, in summary, this new police bill will envisage a collaboration between the various state police formations and, of course, the federal police.
Thank you very much, Governor Dapabiodun. Now, let me go quickly to the Minister of Defense, sitting next to you. Now, General, yesterday and even at other times, you gave strong directive that any security operative who hesitates to engage bandits or terrorists will be treated as an accomplice. You even said we will treat you like a bandit. You said the same thing about religious leaders, traditional rulers, and all of that. And that's tough language. But here is my question. In the heat of battle, how do you distinguish between a genuine tactical delay and cowardice? And how do you ensure that this directive does not lead to reckless use of force or harm to civilians? And if I may add, people have been saying, well, General Musa is always saying this, but there are people that are known publicly and that you have not done anything about them, despite the fact that they support openly terrorists and bandits.
Thank you very much. Let me thank Arise for organizing this forum. It's always important that we have opportunities to speak and communicate to Nigerians for a better understanding. Members of the armed forces have their roles of engagement. Once you are deployed out for an operation, you are allowed to take out the enemy using standards that have already been stipulated in the rules of engagement. One, when your life is at stake and you have no any other way of stopping it. Two, when your colleague's life is at stake and you have no any other way of stopping it. Three, when the community or property you are protecting. So as professionals, we train our troops before deploying them. And once they are deployed, they are able to identify who is a bandit, who is a terrorist, and who is a civilian. Now, I've always said it, that asymmetric warfare is a very, very difficult operation because the enemy is within. Conventional warfare is between one state to another, like one country to another, and you know who your enemy is. Asymmetric warfare, the enemy is just that individual that you think is your citizen, or is your brother, or is your uncle that you are protecting, is the one that could harm you. So it makes it extremely difficult. And if you see worldwide, anywhere there's asymmetric warfare, it takes a very long while before those things are coming. I can give you an example. In Turkey, they've been dealing with the PKK for over 40 years. It is just of recent they are beginning to get, and because they had to use the kinetic and the non-kinetic. Now, the importance is this, that no country can shoot itself to peace. You must be able to bring the kinetics and the non-kinetic working together. And I've said it repeatedly, the kinetic aspect is just about 25-30%. The non-kinetic, which has to do with dialogue, discussion, understanding, together with the communities, because these terrorists live within the communities. And if the communities are on their side, it makes it difficult for the security forces to win the battle. And if the communities are with the security forces, it makes it a lot easier. So it is very, very important. Now, the question we want to ask is, why are we where we are? And are we addressing those symptoms that have taken us to where we are today? We're in a democratic setting, and it's about perception. And it is between the leaders and the led. Now, the led, are they feeling being led properly? Why are they not supporting the armed forces, or why are they not supporting the government? So those are areas that we need to look at so that we provide solutions to these things. And it is the only way when we work together between the armed forces and the communities and the government, then we'll have a headway. And that's why it's critical for us to keep on explaining and interacting with the communities for them to have a better understanding that they have a role to play. The government has a role to play. For us to succeed, our local governments must be up and doing, our communities must be up and doing, and we must give opportunities for traditional rulers, for religious leaders, for local governments to also contribute to the success and the security wherever they are, whatever community they operate in. And it makes it a lot easier. Because when you see something and you have a way to report, and these things are taken in adequately, it will be. Now, areas that have been brought in over time is that we must go to the critical aspects. What are these? As a nation, do we have a database? Because for security forces to work, for the police to work, we need to have a database that we can build. If you go abroad and you commit an offense, it's easier for you to be identified. Why? It's either they get your face, they get your fingerprint, they get your signature or your picture. Because you have a number, they have a database about you, they know everything about you, your cars, your house, and address and everything. Do we have that? What is delaying us from getting those put in place? We must be able to go back to those basics to assist us. What is the legal system? What are the correctional facilities available? How do people feel with the governance within their communities? Are they happy with the community? Because it has to do with the people, the satisfaction of the people that yes, they are being governed properly and they have a role to play wherever community they are. And I can tell you, once people are happy and they can contribute this, it makes it a lot easier. So like I said, it's a whole of community, it's a whole of society, it's a whole of government affairs for us to succeed. This we are dealing with is not only here, but it's important that we understand that for us to succeed, everybody has a role to play. Thank you very much.
This panel will also be joined by the former Prime Minister of Israel, General Ehud Barak, former leader of the opposition. former Minister of Defense, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel, a classical pianist and a fan of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. So as soon as he joins us, he will be talking to us via Zoom. Then now let me come to Professor Shakin, who is representing the Inspector General of Police. Well, Prof, the Inspector General of Police, Tunji Disu, he has assured us that the force, the Nigerian Police Force, is ready. Is it ready? And we want to ask, what is the one assurance you will need from the people, from the governors, and also the National Assembly to make state police a genuine partnership and not a rival force? And how do you plan to ensure that a commissioner of police in a state does not become an agent of oppression or conflict, now that we're told that in the design, the commissioner of police can disobey the governor and report to the National Police Council?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I spoke with the Inspector General of Police yesterday night, and he asked that I should represent him as the chairman of the Police Hearing Committee on State Establishment. The issue you raised is quite important, but we have to understand that there are processes in place. Within the submission of the committee to the Senate, we mentioned a lot of steps that can be taken to alleviate these concerns. And I think this morning they've spoken a lot about the issues and how they are going to be dealt with. In the case of the commissioners of police, disregarding the instruction from the governors, there are already agendas within the statements that have been issued that there are processes that should be taken. There are boards, there are ombudsman, there are police service commission for the state. There are a lot of bits that we've taken into consideration. Again, having attended the inauguration of the policing bill 2 days ago, a lot of work is supposed to start taking place that will alleviate those fears. I think the concerns we've had over the years have never been taken into consideration. This is the first time that we are putting this in paper. This is the first time we are looking at the pros and cons. And in a democracy, you need to understand that there will be views, but majority of the views, in most cases, are considered. On this event, and in particular, because we are moving from a centralized policing to decentralized one, a lot of issues will come up, but until the paperwork is done, and then we put it to practice, a lot of concerns will be raised. And this is why we are having this kind of forum, where we can have agendas to be brought out. We can talk about what is important. For the Inspector General of Police is very keen on making sure that it supports the process. And this is the process. Until it comes to the conclusion, that is when we can start discussing what to do further. But I can assure you that the Inspector General of Police is setting up a committee to support the one that has already been established by the presidency, because they cannot work on their own. And when you look at the issues at hand, you have the policing framework, then you have the constitutional one. And as the Inspector General of Police have said a lot of times, you cannot shave a man's head in his absence. This is why the police is critically involved as a partner, is supporting the process, and I believe that the President is doing the right thing at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ogunshakin. Let me now go quickly to the Governor of Plateau State, Governor Caleb Mutfwang. Now, in the first panel that we had Governor Dauda Lawal of Zamfara, who, like you, also says there will be no negotiation, no payment of ransom where there is attacks, banditry, insurgency, and all of that. And you hold the same view. But you have gone a step further to say that the challenge of insecurity in your state is as a result of elite conspiracy, that it is elite-driven. But you have not yet at any time to told anybody about who those elites are who are causing problems in Plateau State. Maybe you will share that insider knowledge with us here. And then, of course, the other question, we've been talking about operations. And you have Operation Rainbow in Plateau State. Now, what will happen to Operation when you then have state police? Would the non-state actors involved in Operation Rainbow, would they be recruited into the state police in Plateau State?
Thank you, Dr. Abati, and the entire Arise News. I want to thank you for this opportunity to elevate this conversation to a national level. This is much an awaited conversation we ought to have had years ago. Let me thank Mr. President for the courage to walk the talk, to begin to put words into action. Board, I've been an advocate of state police because I believe that the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. And I think that we should not live in fear of the unknown. We should be able to move forward and find ways to mitigate the possible abuses that could occur. I think this is the way to go. And to the second issue you raised, Operation Rainbow was one of the first to be authorized by the federal government way back during the Goodluck Jonathan administration. So it gives us an idea of what state police could look like, but it's still at a very rudimentary stage because all that Operation Rainbow was set up to do was actually about intelligence gathering. And we've had some discontinuity, some policy somersaults, but by and large, it has not entirely disappointed. And since coming on board, we have tried to add more bite to it. We've also set up, deployed some technology and a command center to be able to monitor things across the state. But like our name suggests, Plateau is because we have a lot of treacherous landscape, if you call it that, where you have a lot of inaccessible portions of the state that are still a challenge even for security agencies to access. So sometimes the turnaround time for response takes a little longer than it should be, which generates a lot of frustration among the populace. But the is to build on what you have on the Operation Rainbow so that we can then be able to upscale and properly structure it to be able to deal with all the elements of law enforcement. It's not just about intelligence gathering. There must be also actionable response to the intelligence that you gather. So there's a lot to be done, but I think for us, it provides a good framework. When the necessary framework is done at the National Assembly, then we'll be able to deal with the issues of recruitment and what have you. But I think we have a good head start in that context. Now, coming to the issue of those behind the insurgency, I want to enlarge this a little bit to say that it's multifaceted. Yes, there's the element of elite conspiracy in certain respects, and particularly as we're entering into this season of electioneering, you're going to find a lot of the political actors trying to capitalize on the grief of people to begin to score political points. And I want to say that dealing with insecurity is not just like buying and selling. It takes a lot more than that. So the issue of elite conspiracy is something that is well known even to the federal security agencies, that sometimes some statements have triggered issues and so on and so forth. But I don't want to reduce it to only elite conspiracy. The other dimension of elite conspiracy sometimes is the failure of the elites to actually communicate to the ordinary people why things are the way they are and why things haven't happened the way they are. They tried sometimes to put some bit of color, to the causes of these things. And sometimes they just want to promote hate and so on and so forth. So in that context, we've been trying to upscale our non-kinetic approach. We set up the Interreligious Council in order to be able to moderate some of those differences, and especially the Interreligious Council is largely made up of elites, if I will call them so. We also have a security advisory team that we try to be as inclusive as possible so that we provide a forum and a platform for the moderation of perceptions, of opinions, so that we can be able to reduce tension. Sometimes people send out the wrong history narrative, and it triggers a lot of negative reactions. And these are things we need to keep taming. But to reduce it to only elite conspiracy will be doing injustice to the situation. You're dealing with the issues, of course, of land grabbing. You're dealing with the issues, of course, of contests about identity. You're dealing with the issues of pure criminality, as it were. And so, like I said earlier, it's multifaceted, hydra-headed, and we need to be able to synthesize each of these causes and provide the adequate response to it. Like I've always said, when we mischaracterize a crisis, we deploy the wrong solution. And so, over the last couple of years, what we've been trying to do is to create echo chambers that will be able to portray the true character of the insurgency, which today, by the way, has become a multi-million naira economy in itself, that we need to find ways to dismantle the supply chain particularly, so that it does not feed this industry to the point that we can no longer control. But on a last note, let me say that whatever we are facing today as insecurity, insurgency, is the failure of the past, the failure of consistency, and if we had dealt with some of the issues we are trying to deal with now, many years back, will not be where we are. And I recall what General Irabo said: if we fail to act now, we will still pay for it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Motfwang. Let me come to you, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan represents Kogi Central in the Senate of the Federal Republic, and she was during this day awards in 2025. She was a Senator of the Year. So, Senator, now you've been commenting on the digitalization of banditry and insurgency. You express alarm about these bandits taking over the digital space, and nothing is being done about it. Now, what kind of digital strategies do you think that the state police, as proposed, should adopt to be able to checkmate these terrorists who are so bold that they now go on social media, they even give out free data for people to see their impunity?
Thank you so much, Dr. Ruben Abati, and I'd like to appreciate the management of this day for driving and leading the conversations on national security and state police. Yes, I have spoken loudly about the need to deploy smart technologies to curtail the excesses of insecurity in our country. And that came as a concern whereby some of the terrorists have taken on to engaging the public on their social media handles. Prominent case was one that happened a few weeks back, whereby on TikTok, on a span of about 30 minutes, the bandits gave away hundreds of millions to Nigerians that were willing participants in the giveaway. And one would wonder why the police force and other security agencies will neglect such activity as a means of apprehending these actors. But as a parliamentarian and one that has had a number of experiences both at state and national level, permit me, Dr. Ruben Abati, to speak broadly onto that, considering the fact that I also am a member of the Constitution Drafting Committee, and I participated actively in the development of the clauses which will hopefully shape our reforms, and that would lead us into reenacting the Police Act, which will contain broader solutions to the concerns that many Nigerians raise. I personally am in support of decentralizing the police force because, let's be very honest, in most democratic societies, whether it's America or the United Kingdom, they do operate a decentralized system of policing. And in Nigeria today, if we are being honest with ourselves, there's a huge disconnect with whether it's correspondence or interception or apprehension of the insurgencies at state level, because they do happen from communities up down. And most often, what is on ground is really captured at the national police sector. But let me say this. My three major concerns as a parliamentarian and as a politician that has had a first-hand experience with the police at the state level, which is Kogi State, I would say my first concern is the abuse of this state police by both state and national political actors. I'm mentioning this in capital. The abuse, the concern of abuse of the state police by the state and national political actors. In a situation where there is an abuse or there is a total disregard for the act, the Police Act, where do we go to? Where would ordinary Nigerians, who would they complain to? And the second concern is the recruitment, the training, the promotion, the appointment, the retirement, or probably outright suspensions of defaulting police officers at state level. Who do you report to? How do you trust that your petitions will be addressed and that the police commander, as he will be called, we are no more going to have the commissioner of police, he's then now going to be called the police commander. If the police commander is in default of compliance, who do ordinary citizens report to? And how do we trust that the National Police Council, which will be headed by the President of Nigeria, and that will have the 36 state governors as members, how do you ensure that it will not be a boys' club of some sort or a political club of some sort that will turn a blind eye to genuine and germane complaints of Nigerians for our political parties, as it may be, when there's absolute failure of compliance? That's the second concern. And the third, of course, is funding. There are certain conversations that we would consider either 2 or 3% of the state-generated revenue to fund the state police. But let's be very honest. We do know that the economic opportunities of states in Nigeria vary. We have some big states like Lagos. You can't compare the revenue generated by Lagos, Delta, Kano, with states like Kogi and Zamfara. So we would expect that at the point where we are reenacting the National Police Act, we're going to have conversations where, of course, the general public will be required to participate and put forth contributions, which we would most likely expect the federal government to intervene.
I would like to go to Aremo Olusegun Oshoba, two-time governor of Ogun State, and someone who saw the Native Authority Police in action before that Native Authority Police was abolished, specifically because of the concern about abuse in the states. Now, the state police is back on the table. How do you feel, considering the fact that during your time as a governor, Nobody was talking about state police. We would like you to share your experience with us. And then, of course, this whole talk about state police started with the beginning of this republic under Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, but it didn't gain traction. It has now gained traction. Now, as an elder statesman, what are the booby traps that you think we can look out for? Especially as where people say it's about federalism, it's about devolution of powers. On those two issues, do you think that state police is going far enough to ensure federalism and devolution? And then what are the risks involved?
Well, I thank you very much. I thank this day and Arise for organizing this town hall meeting. Well, I'm happy that there is already a consensus of a kind throughout the country about the issue of state police. And Ruben, you refer to the native authority and local government police. We will all recall when the amalgamation took place in 1914, 2 years after, the Native Authority Ordinance Act was passed in 1916, just as the local government police was created then for both the northern and western region of Nigeria. So what we are talking today is not something new at all. The Native Authority Police and the local government police were at some point under the emirs and obas to collect taxes and things. It worked until the First Republic, when in some cases issue of abuse came into focus. So I would say that what we are seeing today is not something new for a federal system. Even the United Kingdom, where you have almost a unitary government, but which is now devolving power to Scotland, Wales, and creating a kind of federal system of its own, has always had a federal system of policing. The London Metropolitan Police don't go beyond London. And each area, just like in America, you have this county police, and they have a way of cooperating. So I would say that it takes a lot of guts. President to say, I'm going to allow my power to be reduced. That's what President Bola Tinubu is now doing. If you recall, I don't want to unduly criticize any government, but which government does not abuse, whether federal or state? You will recall Odi. It was the federal government who went there and leveled. And you recall, I was asking the governor of
Zakibia.
You recall the federal government went to Zakibia, the village of former chief of army staff, Malu, and leveled the place. So, in anything we are doing, there are certain risks. But the first thing I want you to bear in mind is that security is local and it's at the grassroots. For example, rainbow system in the plateau, the governor said was set up purposely for security purposes, for gathering information. That is where we should start from. How can you bring somebody who does not speak the language of the Bayelsa people, bring somebody from Maiduguri, and you send him to Bayelsa, does he speak Ijaw? And you send somebody from Rivers to go to Sokoto, to go to Maiduguri. It is not possible for that person to be effective. And you send somebody to Lagos who doesn't know Isaleko. Lagos of my days was not more than about 500,000 people. Lagos today is over 20 million people. How do you police from 500,000 people to 20 million people without getting the locals involved? In our younger days in Lagos, there were not just local issues, there were area fathers. The first job they were doing was to ensure that when the public tap water is open at certain hours, there is orderliness in the queue. And at that time, if somebody stole a wheel cover of Governor Abiodun's car, the area father know who to call and to say, in the next 1 hour, we want to have that wheel cover. That is the beginning of grassroots information gathering, intelligence gathering, and we have to go back to that to ensure a proactive police system. As far as I'm concerned, we should now be talking of local government and native authority police to be back. Because an example is this kidnapper chieftain, Evans. Evans was kidnapping people in the southwest region and keeping them in the house in Festac, a federal government popular housing authority in Festac. How come the neighbors did not know that kidnapped people are being kept inside the estate of Festac? So what we need is to realize that state police must first of all be used to gather intelligence. There will be people who are in their own neighborhood who can identify virtually everybody who is who, and they can easily notice suspicious movement. So I will plead that we give full support, and I'm happy the governors are in full support, the National Assembly is in full support, and the generality of Nigerians are in full support. This is not because President Bola Tinubu wanted power for himself. If you are not a federalist, you would not like to sit. I've never seen anywhere in the world where everything is centralized. How can a Inspector General of Police in Abuja be able to police what is going on in our own forest? We have a forest called J4, thick forest. It takes the ordinary hunters and the settlers to be able to know the terrain. I'm praying that Orire, by the grace of God, we will overcome the issue of Orire. Every night I think of that 2-year-old boy. The president and I, when we talk, we say, this 2-year-old boy, what kind of life are we giving to him? A 2-year-old boy being kidnapped in Oyo and known to the locals. I'm sure the federal government they are being cautious because they are using those children as a shield. And that system has to be handled tactically and carefully. And hoping that after these many days, we will resolve it and we will praise God. So to me, state police starts from local intelligence gathering, knowing your people, knowing your terrain, speaking the language of the people. That is the beginning of a successful local policing system. Thank you.
But quickly, let me go to Mr. Duben Mogalu, Senior Special Assistant to the President, Planning and Research, and Secretary Working Group on National Policing Bill. 2 quick questions. In preparing the executive bill, what specific international policing models did your committee look at? And then the second thing is about the relationship between the military and the police. I think under Section 214 of the 1999 Constitution, it is said that the military can be called in situations of serious breakdown like this in aid of the police. Now, when the state police gets here and it starts, then what then happens to the military? Would the military still be involved, or the state police, the federal police, will take over the major responsibility?
Thank you very much, Dr. Abati. Thank you very much to the Arise Group for the opportunity of this town hall on national policing and national security. I bring you the greetings and best wishes of the Chief of Staff to the President, His Excellency the Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, who would have wanted to be here today but is unavoidably absent due to some prior engagements. As to the two questions from Dr. Abati, on the first question of the National Policing Bill, we have only just started the process of drafting that bill. 2 days ago, a committee was inaugurated. It was the Presidential Working Group on the National Policing Bill, chaired by the Chief of Staff to the President, and including the National Security Advisor, the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, the governors of Kwara State and Ogun State, who are the chairman of the Governors Forum and the chairman of the NGF Forum on State Police, as well as the Nigerian Bar Association and, of course, the IGP. So the process of drafting the National Policing Bill has only just started. Let me tell you why that bill is very important. The constitutional amendment that has just passed the Senate and is making its way through the legislative process is the establishment document that creates the pathway to state policing but doesn't expressly initiate state policing in the country. It establishes the constitutional pathway for state policing. But for us to operationalize state policing, to be able to put in place the infrastructure of state policing, to be able to ensure national minimum standards for recruitment, for training, to be able to address questions relating to cooperation between the services, between the different state police services as well as the federal police services. These are all questions that will have to be resolved in the National Policing Bill that is now being worked on. In addition to the National Policing Bill, we have to understand that the entire architecture of our Constitution, of our national security laws, exists with the assumption of a unitary police system. So, amending the Constitution and enacting a National Policing Bill are just two steps of some other consequential amendments that will still have to be made to be able to ensure that the universe of our laws reflects the dual policing system. Now, as to the question of the models that we are looking at, one of the things that we are trying to avoid in creating this dual policing architecture in Nigeria, we are trying to avoid a copy and paste approach. I have heard over the course of this town hall today, a number of people speak about the American model of policing, where you have the federal police, the state police, as well as police at communal and city levels. We are not trying to recreate the American policing model in Nigeria. We are not trying to copy what they have done and then recreate it here. What we are trying to do is to evolve our own dual policing system that reflects our realities, that reflects our own concerns, and that reflects the challenges that we already face and are trying to meet. When you look at community and state policing in the United States of America, and in some of the other climes that have been referred to today, one of the things you have to understand is how policing evolved in those areas. In the US, for example, there is no federal police. The federal police, to the extent that one exists, is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And this is because the evolution of policing in that system started from the communities and went in the other direction. What we have here is a federal system already in place, and we are now trying to move from that unitary system to a dual policing system. So we must be careful to take best practices from some of these places, but not and just adapt their policies to ours and expect it to work in our own climate. Thank you very much.
We have to go now to Israel and speak to our special guest speaker, the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, whose experience leading a nation confronted by persistent security threats brings an international important perspective to today's discussions. He is, of course, a former Prime Minister of Israel, a former Defense Minister, and a former Chief of Staff. So he is in a position to enlighten us tremendously from the perspective of what has been happening in Israel vis-a-vis what is happening in Nigeria today. Prime Minister, I want to welcome you to this event. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to throw to you so that you can say a few words to us, and then I'll have a question and answer session with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak.
Hello, I'm okay, and I'm delighted to be here with all of you and to be able to talk to you over the link. And I want to thank Mr. Nduka Obagbena and Wise News for enabling this whole event. And I'm ready to hear any question and to answer them. We in Israel highly value our developing relationship with Nigeria because it's a great country with a great potential and a promising future, and a major power and player in not just in Western Africa, in the wider zone and on the world arena, and we are looking forward for better relationship.
Well, that was brief, but thank you very much indeed. Let me ask you this, Prime Minister. You've led a country where security threats are both national and very local. In your view, does bringing policing closer to the people through state police actually make citizens safer? Or in a country like Nigeria with a federal structure and 36 states, does it risk creating 36 different standards of justice and 36 different militias? What is the guardrail in your assessment?
Look, we are different. We are coming from different countries. Israel is a tiny country. It's about hardly 10 million. It's about 20 times smaller in population, probably more than Nigeria. And in terms of the geography, the area, we are probably 40 times smaller than Nigeria. So the whole Israel is about the size of average Nigerian state. So in Israel, everything is controlled from the center, and all first responders are operating for one center in the area. From Tel Aviv, within 2 hours of drive, you cover 90% of the population. Nigeria is totally different thing, and I strongly believe that the idea to have a state police for a federal structure like Nigeria, it's a very good start and very good, very step in the right direction for many reasons.
Thank you for that, Prime Minister. Now, one of the biggest fears in Nigeria is that governors will use state police as political tools to harass opponents, rig elections, or protect allies. Israel has strong civilian oversight of its police and security services. What institutional checks did you put in place to prevent elected leaders from weaponizing local security forces? And can that model work in a federation like Nigeria?
Look, the case for state police is stronger when you look at the reality that from when you mobilize and recruit the policemen from within a community, they will be much more sensitive. They will understand the norms and the practices, the religious faith, and everything that relate to the people around them, and they will be much more effective, both in terms of understanding the country, the area, the people, and so on. So it's not that simple to replace it by something else. Of course, every approach has its weaknesses, and the worry that some government might try to use the fact that he has a state police for his own political ambition or so on is a real issue and should be addressed. But I think that it is much easier to deal with such events through the very detailed legislation that gives certain authority to the president and to the central government federal government in Abuja over the governors and so on. It's much easier to correct this element than to activate through a vast country like Nigeria from a central place. You know, response is much faster when you are talking about state police. Response is much more calibrated to the nuances, subtleties of the arena in which it's carried out. Even some aspects of intelligence. Intelligence is essential for running fight against terror, against organized crime, against all the other problems that you have. But you know, it's mainly human, namely human intelligence. When it comes to signal intelligence, that's more complicated. First of all, it's extremely expensive, so it's more naturally run from the capital of the country. And secondly, if the capabilities of signal intelligence ended up in the hands of the wrong person or the wrong group, they can cause huge damage to the national structure and became a kind of a threat. So that should be still kept in the hands of the central government, federal government.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. And as I'm sure you know, Prime Minister, Nigeria already struggles with coordination between the army, the DSS, that's the Departments of State Services, the police, the civil defense, and local vigilantes. From your experience running national security, how do you design a state police system that is locally accountable but still plugs into one national intelligence and command structure to fight groups like Boko Haram and bandits that don't respect state borders?
Yeah, it's, you know, we are in a way, we are different than you in many ways. You know, you are fortunate not to have a real war with any of your neighbors. And while we have for almost 3 years now a kind of quite complicated war, both with the Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and with Iran. But what we share is the fight against terror. We know fighting against terror all along the history of our country, and you have it now. In a way, when the world's attention is now focused on Ukraine and the war with Russia, and recently on the war in the Middle East, where the United States and Israel are involved vis-à-vis Iran and others, the center of gravity of terror moved southward, moved toward the jihadists and the worst of terror organizations, especially Muslim ones, traveled into the Sahel, into Nigeria, into your own neighborhood. And it's true, it's very tough. You have not just Boko Haram, you have other from the OCP to the indigenous of Bayapra and many. It seems that only the south region is relatively quiet, and so you are facing terror very very wide scale, and that's what in a way imposed to spread the authority between local police, local in terms of state level police, and the federal organization. I need that the solution to the challenge you mentioned is by having coordination. The fact that there is a state to every state police for every government, under every government, doesn't mean that there is no coordination, correlation, and dialogue with Abuja. In Abuja, the federal government should have an access to information. There should be certain transparency of what happens in the every state police out of the 35 different ones. And there should be, to the best of my judgment, a central kind of rapid deployment police force under the command of Abuja that could be sent in any region, any one of the other police states to support them when a problem which is beyond their capabilities emerge. That should be part of the picture, and it enables it creates certain dependency of the state police in a real emergency. When it goes beyond their size and their means, they call upon the central federal government to send this rapid deployment police force. Of course, there is a last resort solution to send the army, but in my experience, army people, and I spent decades in the army people is much less focused. They do not really understand their doctrine, their manners, their culture doesn't fit into law enforcement force. And when you send soldiers, I think that you might know it from your own experience. So you send a soldier into missions which is more typical to police, there are some unintended consequences and a lot of complication. Of course, when you have to fight terror organizations behave like mini sovereigns in some area that they took over, in some weak population that they are communities that they are using and enslave in a way, or collect taxes, or try to have kind of a rudimentary governing event. That's probably need the army at the end, and you also have the army. So it's delicate issue. There is certain dependence. There should be certain guidelines coming from Abuja into this security based on the extra intelligence that they have as a result of owning the SIGINT capabilities. And there should be dialogue on two directions. The state should report. There should be no secrets of what happens at police, what are the missions, what they are executing. For the federal authorities, and at the same time, the federal authorities should be sensitive to the needs of which are changing from time to time, or sometimes appearing in several regions simultaneously, and need certain judgment of priorities and so on. It won't be easy, but that's the only way. I tell you honestly, we admire the way that Nigeria, facing so many challenges in terror, in organized crime, in kidnapping, in attempts to intervene, to even think of separatist ideas. And the way that you are doing it while sticking to the commitment to hold it through a democratic system is something that raises admiration to you.
Thank you very much indeed. A big round of applause. I've been asked to come to you, Mr. Chidi Odinkalu, to respond to what you heard the Israeli Prime Minister saying there, much more specifically as it relates to Nigeria and Nigerian state police. And of course, after you answer, my colleague Ruben Abati will take over once again. Mr. Odinkalu.
Thank you very much, Mayoga, and good afternoon, sir. I guess I should adopt the existing line and say I extend my appreciation to His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, for his courage in giving us this bill. If I could sing, I will sing on your mandate. But since my voice is very bad, let me begin by, now there's a gap here, and there's a reason for it. It's actually for the Nigerian public officers who have elected to abandon ship so that this will be a conversation of irrelevance. That's why I've refused to move closer, because they need to be represented in this conversation as ongoing stakeholders. This conversation is so significant that citizens are not invited to the table. So it's a conversation among politicians, fixing for themselves their own instruments of power. That's the first thing. So when I listen to these politicians here talk about, give us examples from America and from all of that, I want us to start by acknowledging this is a uniquely Nigerian conversation. That's why there are no public officers, they've run away. So let's not fool ourselves, and I want to make 5 very quick clarifications along those lines. Number one, we are talking about reforming the most fundamental power of a state in election season. We're in election season, and we're talking of reforming the most significant power of the state without debate. This morning, we've learned that there are, in fact, 2 different versions of the bill going through the National Assembly. An executive bill passed by the Senate and a different one passed by the National Assembly. No citizen has seen those bills nor participated in reviewing them, as citizens are entitled to do. If we are talking about using the police to protect citizens, and citizens are not part of it, who will the politicians be doing business with? Bandits and terrorists? Are they the interlocutors that the politicians will be doing business with? Why are they so afraid of citizens that none is invited to the table? They tell us that before the legislative proposals were considered, they had consultations with citizens. Why are there no citizens seeing the draft proposals and making inputs into them? Now, the other point is this. We are talking about governors as chief security officers of the states. And everything is being done in the framework of security. Let's remind ourselves, the police is a law enforcement institution. There's a difference in the Nigerian scheme between security and law enforcement. It's such an easy distinction to miss. Why do I say so? Under our scheme, nobody here has cited Section 315 of the Constitution. It preserves 4 different pieces of legislation. One is the National Security Agencies Act. Under Section 2 of the National Security Agencies Act, primary responsibility for internal security in Nigeria is not with the police. It is with the State Security Service. The governors are not complaining that we should decentralize state security service. They are complaining they should own the police. These are governors who have never funded their ministries of justice. Now, they will put money to give to police because police is used for rigging elections. They will not fund the ministries of justice, which are essential for putting away criminals who endanger Nigerians. And nobody here is talking about the funding of ministries of justice. Ask all of these governors who have run away how much they have spent on their ministries of justice in the past 4 years. You can count it on your fingers. But they are investing in the police. And And they want us to believe that this is about how to protect the citizens. So let me make 3 other points about protecting citizens. We talk about native authority policing. That's not the issue. Historical memory matters. 25 years ago, 3 states in Nigeria pioneered what we are discussing today. 1, Zamfara State. 2, Anambra State. 3, Benue State. Benue Vigilante Services Law, 2001. Anambra State Vigilante Services Law, 2001. Zamfara State created Hisba. Okay? Those are the 3 states that have given us 3 different pathologies of insecurity in Nigeria. Banditry in Zamfara State, IPOB in Anambra State, Benue State, we know the problems. They have deepened the problem rather than solved it. That is why we need to care about process. We need to care about the contents. But when you raise that, the governors say what? It is detail, it doesn't matter. It is everything. There is a consensus historically on the question of policing. In 2006, the Ahmad Presidential Committee on Police Reform agreed what we are discussing. In 2008, the MD Yusuf Committee on Presidential Committee on Police Reform agreed we need decentralization. In 2012, the Perry Osayande Commission on Presidential Commission on Police Reform agreed it. That's not the issue. The issue is the detail. And on those details, they are running away from citizens. They don't want to hear from us. And this morning, we heard from the majority leader of the Senate. What did he do? He was talking about proposals should be. But he's the person who shepherded the bill through the Senate. What did he put inside it? So let me conclude with 2 more things. Number 1, we've heard the governor of Anambra State here tell us about how we need to address also fiscal federalism. And he makes a very valid point. He also wants us to decentralize courts. There are 27 federalisms in the world. There is only 1.5 that have state Supreme Courts. The United States model is very unique. Mexico does not have a state Supreme Court as such. Every major appellate system terminates in 1 court. The invitation to state courts is an invitation to anarchy. The idea that land issues should be finished at the state level leaves you with 1 question. The Constitution protects a right to property in Chapter 4. If land is not property, what is? And if you are from Zamfara State and you go and buy land in Anambra State and you will have 2 neighbors of the governor taking instructions from the governor as how to decide it, you're finished. You no longer have a country. You have Bantustans. If we want to establish Bantustans, we should call it Bantustan Republic of Nigeria. Finish. And let me finish on this note, therefore. Training and doctrine, which is what the former Chief of Defense Staff called attention to. We are going to be creating state police with no transition arrangements, with no provision for anything, and we are talking about these things don't matter. You know, these are minor issues. How do you, in a policing system that has restricted over 170 something AK-47s in the last 5 years, we are saying it does not matter who has arms, to whom it is given. Because we want to give governors the power of state policing in an election season. Let's remember that. This is happening in an election season. And we are not allowed to ask the question, why should that be so? Let me yield on that score, and I hope that we can continue as citizens, even when the politicians don't want to listen, to continue to have this conversation, because at the end of the day, it is our assets online. The politicians are already well protected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chidi Ansem Odinkalo, the next speaker. And that is Tony Ojukwu, SAN, who is the current chairman of that National Human Rights Commission. And let's talk about risk to civil liberties. Now, some fear, some Nigerians are afraid, that state police will be used to silence opposition, harass journalists, and intimidate voters. And I guess this is what Professor Odinkalo was referring to when he said this is election season. Now, what is the single biggest risk to civil liberties if state police is implemented without adequate oversight? And what oversight mechanisms will you recommend?
Thank you very much. Let me join the previous speakers to thank this day and Arise News for organizing this program and doing this, joining the National Human Rights Commission and being the conscience of the nation. Thank you very much for the opportunity. The questions you asked are very germane. But let me first of all say that in talking about state police, we seem to talk so much about the people in authority. We are so concerned about them, and nobody is really thinking about those of us out there, people in the streets, the citizens. The whole idea about state police is to make a difference from the existing police structure now. The police structure now is more or less heavy on protecting people in authority as against the people out there. The state police we are talking about now is going to be or must be a people-centered police. There's going to be a change in psyche. The problem we had before is that the Nigerian police now was inherited from colonial masters. And if you look at the history, from inception, it was used to oppress the people, to collect taxes and revenues and all that. And that is what we inherited. So from the beginning, the Nigerian police force was anti the people. That is not where we are today. The state police will give us an opportunity from inception to fashion a police force that will be people-centered. And how are we going to do this? From the recruitment, we must get the right people to enter the Nigerian police force. People in the police force must be educated people. They don't have to be dropouts who cannot get jobs anywhere. I believe in this country today, there's no part of this country with the number of youths that are unemployed, there's no part of this country today that will not have enough, at least NCE and graduate young people who can join the Nigerian police. This is very, very important because the security of the state today is going to be majorly based on digitized processes. We are not going to have an analog police again if we are going to cope with the challenges of security of the day. So if people are not educated, they will not be able to drive the kind of police force we want. Now, a child at 40, a man at 40 can hardly be corrected. That is part of the problem of the present Nigerian police. We are saying from inception now, from day one, let it be that the state police is just a baby. We can fashion exactly the kind of baby we want out of the state police. And how can we do this? The recruitment process has to be right. And the training colleges, what is the curriculum for training them in the police colleges? Majorly, complaints about the Nigerian police is about impunity, abuse. Can we mainstream human rights? We ought to mainstream human rights fully into the training of people who are going to be in the state police. We are going to mainstream right from the beginning, not after they have left the police training colleges. We are going to mainstream into the fact that before they can be promoted or given any duties, they must pass their exams in human rights. Their psyche must be changed totally to understand that the people on the streets are the people who they are meant to serve. Now, if that is the background of the state police, then it becomes very difficult to give illegal orders to an educated police officer for that officer to carry out, including using that officer to rig elections and commit other malpractices during elections. Because even under the police force order, you are not supposed to obey an illegal order. And if a police officer is trained and the rules of engagement from the one are to do the right thing with human rights mainstreamed, we believe that it will produce a new generation of police officers that will meet the yearnings of the people, that will not be used that even if there are 2 or 3 of them that go the wrong way, there should be strict accountability. One of the challenges we've had also is the issue of esprit de corps. Whenever a police officer commits an offense or does something wrong, discipline has been very, very slow. We think that under the present structure, a transparent way of dealing with disciplinary cases should be instituted. And I'm happy that some of the drafts we have seen have fully mainstreamed both the civil society, the National Human Rights Commission, and the civil populace into the leadership of the police, of the state police that is coming. I don't want us to stand here and condemn every effort made at national development. That is not the right way to go. I think the right way to go is to engage the process from the beginning to make sure that the right things are done. Not after the wrong things have been done, then we start correcting them from the back. And I also agree with the last speaker in the aspect of consultation. There should be appropriate consultation. There should be wide consultation in the bill before it is passed.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have less than 15 minutes or thereabouts to get to the end of this program. And you don't want to take the microphone and you get cut off while you are still speaking. Now we will come to the audience and we're going to be very quick about it. Please do not speak for more than 1 minute. If it's a question, go straight to the question after introducing yourself. If it is a comment, just make it short. No lectures. No lectures. Okay, I see there is a lady there. Okay, I also see someone there. And then it's Dr. Chidi Diugu from the university with us. Is that Dr. Chidi? Okay, so I'll start with you. Please, housekeeping rules, less than 1 minute, if possible.
Thank you very much, Ruben. What is our cybersecurity architecture that will support the state policing? This talk has all been about state policing. However, the topic says national security. And please, I want to point out here that in as much as it's not possible to be called a husband without a wife, you cannot talk about a secured nation without a gateway. Nigeria happens to be one of these countries in the world that has no national gateway as far as cybersecurity is concerned. When we talk about national security, it's no longer about land, sea, air, and so on and so forth. They are now the fourth domain of war, which is the space, and the fifth domain of war, which is cyber. Cyber is the connected space, imaginary space, between 2 devices that are connected by internet. Most wars that we have to fight, or most things that we have to police, do happen in the cyberspace. And I have not had any conversation around the technology that will support how the states will be able to speak to the National Cybersecurity Incident Response Team to be able to police our people. It's a large conversation, but I look forward to having further conversations on the national security architecture with regards to our cybersecurity incident response team, our network centers, and how they are linked up to be able to secure us from cyberspace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, madam, you are next. Please keep it short and brief. The kiss rule.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Rose Benokabwe. I have a lot to say, and I'm sure I can't say it within 1 minute, so just stop me when it's 1 minute. So we've listened to the politicians, and some of them have expressed fear of what is going to happen to them if they're state police. The others reassured them that nothing will happen to them if they're state police. but nobody has really told us what will happen to the citizens if there is state police. They are talking about increasing the policing, but they're not saying how it will impact the citizens. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, the police here in Abuja uncovered a group of kidnappers, and two of the kidnappers had been arrested 4 years ago for kidnapping. They were still let back onto the streets to go and kidnap again. So after you've arrested them, what happens? Policing just doesn't end with arresting. Why did they not go to court? Why were they not convicted? Where is the law that says that kidnapping because kidnapping is really one of our main security issues. Where is the law that says kidnappers should never be let out, they should never have parole, they should never have pardon? Where is the law that says bandits should all be, once they are arrested and they are convicted, that they should be sentenced to death? And sentenced to death is not just sentenced to death and then 10 years later you let them out. Sentenced to death should be for us to see them being killed. We see these bandits on the TV showing the money that they have made. But where do we see the corresponding video showing us these people being killed and the consequences of these things? So I'm hearing a lot of the impact of this on politicians, whereas we're not really addressing the main point, the impact on us. How will all this extra policing help us, the citizens? Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Well, you tried. You tried to keep to the rule. There is a man there who has been flashing with his own torchlight. Well, since we're discussing police matters, I don't think we should disobey him. Please come quickly.
Hello, my name is Tunji Lardner. I've worked on police sector reforms, so I have a little bit of institutional memory and understanding of it. I'm going to base my presentation on two things. One is what I would describe as the lack of a clear ontological logic as to what we're doing. Why are we doing what we're doing? All I've heard is the what and the why. I haven't heard any clear definitions as to the how. The second part of this submission that is always entirely missing in all these conversations is what I might describe as the geriatric state capture. You have a bunch of old people talking about the future of younger people. Demographically, fully 80% of the Nigerian population is under the age of 45. So by the time you start hitting 60 and beyond, demographically speaking, you're statistically irrelevant. And you're talking about the future of 95% of Nigerians, but they're not represented here. They are not represented here. The other adjunct to my presentation is that we missed the point entirely. I'm going to go back to the first point about the lack of ontological logic here. We're talking about what and why, but the how is always very missing. Nigeria's problems are not technical, and that's all we've been talking about. They are adaptive. I want you to frame that very carefully. All of you have Google and AI. Technical challenges, technical solutions to adaptive problems. It frames it more realistically. Otherwise, we'll be having this talking shop. We come here, talk about state police. Politicians come here, talk about it has no bearing on the future of Nigerians. I would like to have a conversation that future-proofs the security of this country, that takes into consideration the demographics, that has the brightest, most dedicated people trying to solve these problems. Two bookend arguments here. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over, and you expect different results. That's what we're doing. The second one is a quote from Einstein. You can't solve a problem thinking at the level that caused the problem. We're consistently trying to solve problems thinking below the levels are. So we can never solve it. Thank you.
Tunji Ladna. Just some final recognitions. The entire This Day Arise News family is here. Managing Director This Day, Eniola Bello, is here. The Ombudsman, Mr. Kayode Komolafe, is here. And then the whole team. And then, of course, the man who has sat through all of this quietly, just doing things from the background, is the strategist who has put this together, the visionary who has said it is important that we have this forum to build a consensus around the issue of state police. Of course, you know him, the Duke of our Kingdom, the chairman and editor-in-chief of This Day Group, and also Arise News Television. Please, let's put our hands together for Prince Nduka Obagbena. Thank you very much for all you do. Now, as we begin to wrap up, there is a saying in Nigeria that the big masquerade dances last. And we have in our midst a statesman, an elder statesman, a man who is the leading light, a leading light in our profession of journalism, and who has seen it all over the decades. Nigeria, the making of it, and the unmaking of it. I would like to invite, very quickly, Chief Olusegun Oshoba to give his closing remarks.
Well, first of all, I think all of us should say a very big thank you to This Day and Arise, and under the leadership of the only Duke, Nduka Obagbena, for arranging this colloquium and village meeting. Now, I want to appeal that This Day and Arise should do a summary of the conclusion of what we have been doing for about 5 hours today, take the salient points and send them to the executive and the legislative arms for consideration, as the representative of the Chief of Staff has promised us that another bill is coming. Yoruba people say that tí Ọlọ́run bá ti fi ọ̀tá ẹni hàn ni kò lè pani mọ́. That once you know your enemy, you work out modalities to really fend him off. So we have heard of the problems that may arise from state police. And so the presidency is listening. And they must take safeguards against all those things. Finally, we must thank the president. Say what you like, it's not common for somebody in power to decide to sit and devolve the power in his hand out of his hand to other levels. It's not common in life. What we have had in the past is that people get to power. So many IGs have gone through, they've all been opposed to state police. So many presidents have all been opposed to state police because they don't want to lose the power at the highest level. I gave you the example of, when you talk of abuse, we have had all kinds of abuses in the past. So, Nduka, I thank you very much. And for all of you who are here, I counted, we still have about 50 of us left. Sitting down for 4 or 5 hours is not easy. I want to thank all of you and praise all of you for your patriotism and interest in the development of this country. I am an optimistic person. Nigeria will be great again. And along this line, I think we should recommend to the state, the world has gone digital. The era of infantry fighting, soldier to soldier, is gone. Take the example of Ukrainian war. Now, war has gone digital. Drones, missiles, go to Iran. So our state government must also be told to install giant cameras for security purposes, to be proactive I was in Enugu for Guild of Editors Conference, and the government of Enugu did a brilliant thing. The man-tech giant cameras that can see so many miles away on the mast of telephone providers. One, they get Wi-Fi. Two, they get power. And they are able to round up the whole of Enugu. So as we discussed state police, our state government should also be proactive, be digital in ensuring that we have our all areas covered by camera. In UK, you don't see armed police parading the streets in London, but every movement is monitored by the CCTV. So that will be part of the thing that we should recommend to federal government and state government. Once again, I thank all of you. May God continue to bless you. May we have a greater Nigeria that in our own time we shall be proud of. God bless Nigeria.